Excellent, excellent. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Here in Florida is good afternoon. But it's always a pleasure and an honor to be here to be able to talk about, spiritism, to be able to explain and show some of the things that the amazing doctrine has taught us. And today we're going to be talking about the mechanisms of gratitude. So the idea is for us to understand a little bit more about the effect of gratitude, the effects of ingratitude or the lack of gratitude, and how we can bring that to our lives and be able to express it on our daily lives. Starting with the etymology. So gratitude comes from, the word gratia or gratus or gratitudo from the Latin, which has the same meaning. And the idea is state of being thankful. So for us to understand a little bit of the word, and one of the spiritual benefactors called Joanna de Angelis, she says that gratitude stands out as one of the most relevant among the noble sentiments that characterize a psychologically mature individual. So she's talking and she has a whole series on um, the crossing of psychology and spiritism, and she can teach us a little bit more about what that means and how gratitude sort of entails this idea of somebody that is psychologically mature or somebody that has achieved some sort of maturity, that they are able to incorporate and express gratitude more often in their lives. On the top corner of the screen, as usual, you're going to have the source material for the slide. I always recommend to go get the book, read yourselves, and interpret it yourselves. But this one here is from the book Psychology of Gratitude, psychographed by Divaldo, and this is by Joanna de Angelis. And she says this: it is important to be thankful for all the goodness one enjoys, as well as for the vicissitudes that have not happened yet. But equally so is the gratitude one feels when difficulties do arise, for one understands they happen for a reason, and that they are necessary to one's process of spiritual growth and as programmed in the law of cause and effect. So she's talking about the gratitude in different, being thankful for everything that is good that happens to us. But she's also talking about the gratitude for that we must feel if we want to be psychologically mature, for when difficulties arise, because we start to understand that they happen, number one, for a reason, and number two, because there's a purpose. There is something that we can take from it. There's something we must improve when those difficulties do arise. And when it's talking about the law of cause and effect, and I put the question there, what about the so-called free will? Is because we are, Leon Denis, which is another author, said that the soul is the author of its own destiny. We are the authors of our own destiny. There's no fatality. We are the authors of what we do and what we're going to be reaping as we sow, as we go through our lives. And the law of cause and effect with this idea of gratitude is exactly that. This idea that when these difficulties arise, they are rising for a reason. Could be a trial, could be an expiation, but whatever the reason is, for us to be grateful that we can now have those difficulties and we can grow from them. And the free will is exactly this notion of, number one, we are here because, or the difficulty arose because of maybe something we chose to endure or something we must endure. But it's up to me to either have the progress be quick or be slow. So this idea of the free will having that coming into play. She also says that no one is born grateful, neither does one obtain gratitude in a leap. Nature, there's no leaps in nature. Evolution doesn't happen in a leap. One learns gratitude through its practice, which must be initiated within the family, the society in miniature, where affection expresses itself naturally. So, of course, in this idea of this microcosm of society being our family, the close ones, they're ones that are very close to us. And she's saying where affection expresses itself naturally, because for a mother to a son, a father to a daughter, etc., brothers and sisters, and sons and etc., and daughters, there's this notion of this innate love that we feel for one another, and this idea that the gratitude, we start to practice that, as you know, in the family, which is a society, like she's saying, society in miniature, but that nobody's born with that. Nobody's born with this idea of mastered gratitude, that we are grateful for everything that happens to us on a daily basis, be it good or bad, so that we must practice it. And I'll bring that towards the end, this idea of practicing and some suggestions for it. She says gratitude for one's apparent failures constitutes recognition in that the individual comprehends the disappointments are part of the learning process and their occurrence has a reason. If we do not stumble, we don't advance. That's how we grow. That's how a child learning to walk does the same thing. Stumbles and then takes the first step, and then stumbles and the first step, second step, so forth and so on. And the idea is this: the failures, they provide us space for growth. Failure or mistakes, they're excellent teachers, as long as we're willing to learn their lesson, or the lesson they have to teach. External peace, she says, starts within each one, and so it is with gratitude. Instead of fear of accepting it, let one be a spontaneous donor and become cured of all blemishes, whilst rehearsing generalized harmony. And she goes on to even further to say that life without gratitude is sterile and void of existential meaning. And I underline gratitude and I bolded existential meaning, because it's one of the things that she talks a lot about in her psychology series, and all the books that she has written, and through the hands of Vivaldo, about this idea of the existential meaning. And then how many, if we stop to think about it, how many of mental health conditions, and I treat them, are because of a lack of the existential meaning, or a lack of purpose, or feeling lost, or and gratitude. She's saying that a life without gratitude is going to be void of existential meaning, because if we are not grateful for what we are, for what we have, for the things that happen to us and for us, then it's like a sterile life, is a psychologically immature life, and then there's not much meaning. When we're expressing gratitude, we're going to see there are many benefits that come from it, psychologically and spiritually. But sometimes we only appreciate life after passing through dire conditions. Isn't that true? How many times do we only appreciate what we have after something has happened that has taken that away? Perhaps, I don't know, having an injury, for instance. I used to play a lot of sports. Whenever I had an injury and I would be sidelined, I would remember, wow, I never realized how grateful I must be, or that I should be, actually, for being able to run, to do all these sports, and now I can't. And you feel that, you lose sort of that. And this happens, of course, with many people when they're going through situations. I mentioned something that's not dire, but of course, when somebody goes through something that's hard, as like cancer, or like the external factors happening in California, all those things, then we appreciate everything that we have. Then we sort of think, oh, I should have been more grateful. And when we have that back, if we have that back, if we acquire that again, we're gonna be more grateful for it. Gratitude, she says, Joanna De Angelis, is a blessing, albeit of unknown worth. The unknown worth is interesting, because it is a blessing, but we can't directly tell how much of a blessing that is. But it's almost like we're spreading all these seeds of love through our gratitude, and those are eventually, with time and with proper care, they're gonna flourish and they're gonna grow. But it's of unknown worth, but that doesn't mean, of course, that we shouldn't be investing in it or practicing it. And she goes on to say too that to live is to practice gratitude for everything to which one is subjected and which one has the opportunity to experience. The fact that we are here, the fact that we have, and when I say we, I mean discarnate spirits and incarnate spirits, both. But let's talk about the incarnate spirits. The fact that we are here, we have received this opportunity in the flesh, in this material prison, to once again continue to evolve, to correct past mistakes, to acquire new skills and everything. So, by that itself, we should be very grateful for this opportunity. But there's the role of humility too that she talks about, in the sense of humility being connected with gratitude. She says, the stimulus propitiated by humility is one of the fundamental reasons for the expression of gratitude, for it allows the individual to understand how much is being received from the free air one breathes to the noble autonomous phenomena of the organism that preserve our existence. No one is so self-sufficient as to be completely independent of everything and everyone. And this identification leads to psychological maturation. Look how beautiful this is. It's almost like a progression, a step by step. The humility that we must work and we must try to improve this virtue, which will eventually lead to the understanding that we are not self-sufficient and we're not completely independent of everything and everyone, even though sometimes we may think that we are, would like to think that we are, but no one is so self-sufficient as to be completely independent of everything and everyone. So when we sort of realize that, it brings us to it levels us with everybody else. So we don't think of ourselves as better than somebody else, but we think of everybody as being connected, everybody having this interdependence in our lives, which is, I think, is something very beautiful that creates this sort of harmony, this sense of brotherhood and knowing in kindred spirits. And I'll show you this author in a second, but there's this author called Martin Seligman, who is one of the founders of positive psychology. And I was watching one of his interviews one day, and he said something that struck me. And he was saying that he was writing an autobiography, but he said that there's no such thing as an autobiography. And of course, if we go in the literal sense of autobiography, of course, I can write about my own life. But he was saying that everything is a biography, not an autobiography, because as he started to write his own autobiography, because he was writing it himself, he realized how many people were and still are important in his life, how many people he was grateful for from childhood to adulthood in his life, personal and professional, that without them he would not be where he is. And that struck me, and I'm like, that's something beautiful to realize, that there's no autobiographies, there's biographies, because we're all interconnected. And here it is in the bottom there, Martin Seligman. And, given my background in psychology, I'll bring some psychological studies here. The one on the top, Brené Brown, she, became quite famous, a couple of years ago. Netflix she had a talk on Netflix. She's published a bunch of books, a lot of them very, very good. And in this book called The Gifts of Imperfection, 2010, she talks about a study of having done 12 years of study, 10,000 different subjects. And she was trying to find out if the people who are happy or great, among other things, she was trying to see the gratitude, and she was trying to see if people who are happy are grateful. So if somebody considers themselves happy, are they usually more grateful? Do they usually practice more gratitude? And what she found was interesting. She didn't find that the happier people were grateful, but she did find that people who were grateful were happier. They had a happier overall, better score in the happiness scale. So it's the other way around. Is the gratitude generating the sense of well-being and happiness, and not just a sense of well-being and happiness inherently giving us the idea or the notion of practicing our gratitude. And Martin Seligman, in one of his many studies, this is one from 2011, he did a weekly assignment where people had to write certain things and deliver a letter of gratitude. And he was looking at, among other things, gratitude and kindness and intelligence. And he was trying to see which one of these had the biggest impact on also happiness. And he found that all those things, so having the resources, engaging in positive thinking, having intelligence, or being very kind, he found that gratitude was the one that was strongly associated, or most strongly associated, with the sense of happiness and well-being. So we have two different people here, and they're talking about this idea of the gratitude, the practice of gratitude, of understanding how we must be grateful and actually practicing it, having all these positive effects. And if we go even further, when we're talking about the neuroscience of gratitude, there's of course a plethora of studies. I brought the three here. One is this one that was done in Japan, is a systematic review of the effects of gratitude intervention on mental health and well-being among workers. And they found that gratitude exercises, so example, making lists of things that they are grateful for, can serve as a buffer against symptoms of depression and positively affect the mental health of workers from multiple areas. So the buffer there is italicized just because it's a concept that means that it serves as like a protection, as a layer of protection against symptoms of depression, meaning practicing gratitude can increase your depression tolerance, let's call it this way, or anxiety, or any mental health related condition. So the more grateful we are, and the harder things happen to us, the threshold for developing mental health conditions, or diagnosable by the DSM-5 TR, they lower. And this other one was done in China this time, and he found that people who wrote letters showed greater neurosensitivity in the medial prefrontal cortex, this part right here, which is a brain area associated, among other things, with learning and decision making. But they found that this effect was found 3 months after the letter writing began. So they're saying in this one, they're talking about these sort of lasting effects of these people who practice gratitude daily and who practice gratitude with the writing of these letters, and they're seeing that on a neurological level. They're not seeing that only on a psychological level like the one from before, but on a neurological level they're seeing this activation of the medial prefrontal cortex. Lastly, there's this study that was interesting, that they asked participants to write a few sentences each week. They divided into three different groups. One group wrote about something neutral, or you just have to write about something. The other group wrote about things that happened during the week that upset them, or bad things. And the other one wrote about or daily irritations, things like that. And the third one wrote about things they were grateful for that had occurred during the week. So they had to stop and make the exercise to like think back to throughout the week and see what they could be grateful for during that week. And this group that had the gratitude, they were the ones that after 10 weeks, so they went a couple of months later, they talked to these people, they measured them, and those who wrote about gratitude, they were more optimistic. They had a great increase in optimism about their lives, and even following them way later, they found that these people had less visits to the doctor and they exercised more often than the other ones in the other groups. But we don't need to look into psychological studies only from or neuroscience studies from peer-reviewed journals. We can go through spiritism. Even we can find some authors that talk about it too, and Joanna de Angelis is one of them. So in the same book, Psychology of Gratitude, she says that the habit of being grateful through its own repetition, it's almost like a skill, you need to repeat it, equilibrates the discharges of adrenaline and noradrenaline, while cortisol, which is related to stress, right, maintains its control over these chemical substances, thus neutralizing any possible excesses that would consequently produce alterations of the glycemic level and the cardiac rhythm. So if I didn't say this was from a spiritist book, nobody would say that it was from a spiritist book. You'd think it's from another one of the studies that I showed. But she's talking about there's these improvements in cholesterol level, quality of sleep, increasing self-esteem, lowering the arterial pressure for those who have high arterial pressure, reduction of anxiety, anger, depression, stress. So just the habit of being grateful through its own repetition. So it's not being grateful only in November when we have everybody together on the table here in the United States and we're being grateful, which is good. But she's saying about the habit. So a habit is something that we repeat, often through its own repetition. So it's like practicing the gratitude has all of those positive effects that we see in the brain, that we see in our psychological well-being. But at the most basic level, we see gratitude as an act of love. Being grateful to someone, to ourselves, to our planet, to our master, to our God, to the spirits, to everything that we have. And when I say have, I don't mean just material possessions. I mean everything that we are and what we have in our lives is an act of love. Again, no person is impermeable to an act of love. And we have plenty of different books from André Luiz, psychographed by Chico Xavier, that talks about exactly how no person is impermeable to an act of love. We have innumerable examples of people, of spirits who have been dwelling in anger and pain, that when there is an act of love, when they're shown love and they're shown the light, even through an act of gratitude, they start to change. These barriers that they put themselves, they start to disintegrate and they can see the light and follow the light. So it's hard to be grateful for challenges, for difficulties, but she's saying, Joanna here is saying, the challenge to gratitude actually happens in times of difficulty and difficulties when adversities appear, since they are a part of the demanding process of evolution. Yeah, we would love to be thankful for all our challenges. We're not, I'd say we, generally speak, I don't know everybody here personally, but I'd say, at least for myself, I'd like to be psychologically mature, to be immediately grateful for all the challenges and difficulties, but I'm not. But it's something that I must be cognizant of, and I must be thinking and trying to improve. And she's saying this challenge to be grateful is actually the difficulty, or the challenge to gratitude is when these times of difficulty appears. But then we have St. Augustine that says something interesting. He says, harsh trials, hear me well, almost always indicate an end of suffering and of an improvement for the spirit when they are accepted out of love for God. Harsh trials, I'm going to read it again because it's beautiful, almost always indicate an end of suffering and of an improvement for the spirit when they're accepted out of love for God. So thinking about this, I thought of Paul of Tarsus, and how he would say when he had all these difficulties and all of these, physical, psychological maltreatment, emotional maltreatment that he received as he was preaching the gospel and everything in his life, he would be thankful for those things, and he would say, wow, if I'm suffering, if I'm getting this much pain and this much difficulties and challenges, I'm grateful for it, because it means that God thinks that I am worthy of them. When we accept these challenges out of love for God and out of love for understanding that maybe this suffering could indicate, or sorry, this challenge or difficulties, this trial may truly indicate the end of a suffering. Because as Joanna talks about trials and expiations, she's talking about trials, these things we accept as challenges, as things to improve, and expiations. And I love that she says this. I always say this in my lectures because I love it. She says these expiations are a return to balance, or a return to the harmony that was once lost. Meaning I was walking, let's say I was going in a spiritual path that was good, but all of a sudden I deviated and I did harm to a brother or sister of mine. And if I need to expiate that later, is to bring that balance, that harmony that I myself lost. And maybe some of these trials and tribulations and these things that happen could indicate the end of suffering if we accept them with the love of our God. And in this book here, we have a couple of messages by Emmanuel. Unfortunately, we don't have this book in English yet, but I brought two messages here that talk about gratitude for the adversaries. Emmanuel says, appreciate your friends, thanking them for their company. However, never despise your opponents or underestimate their importance. Pray to God to bless you, but reconcile yourself every morning with all creatures and with all things, thanking them for the gifts or the lessons they offer you. Pain is a big teacher. Pain is a big teacher, offers plenty of lessons to us. Either, again, balance that we lost or harmony that we lost and we're trying to restore, or something that we did that we're exceeding a certain limit, physical and psychological, emotional, then pain comes and levels that. So pray to God to bless you, but reconcile yourself with all creatures and all things, because everything is interconnected. We are not here by mistake, and we're not here to practice idleness and passive acceptance. We are here because it matters for ourselves and for the ones around us. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, we have the gratitude to God. And it says here, on lifting up our soul to God each night, we should remember in our innermost self the many favors that He has granted us during the day and offer thanks for them. But most especially, at the moment we receive the effects of His goodness and protection, we should spontaneously bear witness to our gratitude. For this, look at this, for this, it is enough that we direct a thought attributing the benefit to Him without even interrupting our work. It's not saying that we must stop everything that we're doing and do something grandiose to show our gratitude to God. It's saying even a thought without interrupting our work, even a thought. And prayers are exactly the externalizing that sentiment through, a prayer could be an innermost prayer. But the idea is the thought that we learn through Spiritism, how our thoughts can create, modulate, destroy, construct, how they can do all these things. And our thoughts are very powerful. And even with a simple thought of gratitude to God every day for everything that we have at our disposal, everything that we have in our lives. So it doesn't take a lot of effort to be thankful, if we're honest. It's not an effortful thing. It's quite effortless to be thankful, but the habit and the repetition and the sentiment behind that, even for the difficult things, that's something that we definitely must work on. But the absence of gratitude, we're talking about all the benefits of having gratitude and practicing it. But what about the ingratitude? Well, let's talk a little bit about ingratitude. Joanna the Angelus says that the absence is replaced by an emotional termite that devours the individual from inside out, much like that social insect which finds in dead or live plants a means of nourishment, eating them up voraciously as it consumes them. So she's talking about the absence of gratitude as being this sort of emotional termite, and I thought that was very interesting, and that's why I bolded it there. An emotional termite. So a termite is something that devours these things that are in theory like good things. And in the same way that if we're not practicing gratitude, it's like there's this emotional termite, or if we're being ungrateful, if we're feeding this emotional termite, or we're letting it run free. If we go to the gospel, I mean, in Luke, we have the history of the 10 lepers, which we don't use that terminology of the leprosy anymore, but I'll use it here because I want to do it verbatim. So there was, there's this passage, and I'll read it here for you guys in Luke 17 that says that when Jesus was on his way to Jerusalem, he traveled alongside the border of Samaria and Galilee. This is the passage. Now I want to read this one verbatim. As he was going into a village, 10 men who had leprosy met him. They stood at a distance and called out in a loud voice, "Jesus, Master, have pity on us." When he saw them, he said, "Go, show yourselves to the priests." And as they went, they were cleansed. One of them, when he saw that he was healed, came back praising God in a loud voice. He threw himself at Jesus' feet and thanked him, and he was a Samaritan. Jesus asked, "Were not all 10 cleansed? Where are the other 9? Has no one returned to give praise to God except this foreigner?" Then he said to him, "Rise and go, your faith has made you well." Of course, there are many lessons in this passage here, many lessons. But one that when we're talking about gratitude or ingratitude, we look at this and we think that, first of all, what those afflicted by this disease, this devastating disease back then, we have to understand the social component and emotional component as well. Physically, of course, it was terrible, but these people, they were completely relegated. They were completely shunned by society from everything, and they were considered at that time to be impure, to have sinned, so nobody wanted even contact with them. The family considered them dead, basically. So these people living among themselves with a lot of suffering, completely excluded from society, they saw Jesus and they wanted the miracle that they heard about. So Jesus came, healed them, and he even says, "Go show yourselves to the priests," because the priests back then were the ones that would sort of attest to the purity, or for them to having become healed from the leprosy. And it's interesting because the story says that the 9 went, but one, when he was healed, he came back to thank, singing praises to God and to thank Jesus. And Jesus was I don't want to say baffled, but I can't no I there's no way I can know what he thought, but he was in a way surprised, and says, "We're not all 10 cleansed. Where are the other 9?" Which is, if we think about it too, in some ways, this is a story of ingratitude, because these people, the 9 that never came back to even thank Jesus for restoring their lives, for bringing them back into society, to heal their pains, 9 of them didn't even return. And in this story, it makes me think too, how many times have we not been one of those 9? How many times have we, and if we think of 10 different difficulties that we overcome, how many of those have we been grateful for after we overcame them, or for them and after we overcame them? So that's something that I wanted to present to you guys as well, for us to sort of, think to ourselves and realize, how many times have we been like that and ungrateful for the challenges that come to us, or for the people that help us through those challenges. That's the picture of the one coming back and thanking him, while everybody else is just off on their way. And in the Spirit's book, the question 937 says, "Are not the disappointments that are caused by ingratitude and by the fragility of earthly friendships also a source of bitterness of the human heart?" They're going to say yes. "But we teach you to feel pity for the ungrateful and for faithless friends. Their unkindness will do more harm to themselves than to you. Ingratitude comes of selfishness, and he who is selfish will meet sooner or later with hearts as hard as his own has been. Remember that Jesus himself during his life was scoffed at, despised, and treated as a knave and as an impostor. And do not be surprised that you should be treated in the same way. Let the consciousness of the good you have done be your recompense in your present life, and do not trouble yourself about those to whom you have done it." Of course, ingratitude is talking about selfishness and pride, as we have already learned, or we're learning. are these two scourges of our current society, or of our current state, from a spiritual scale. And they're saying ingratitude comes from that. It comes from this selfishness. If we were to register day by day the many benefits we receive without even having asked for them, we would be greatly surprised to perceive there are so very many that we have swept from our minds and would feel ashamed of our ingratitude. Again, look at how many things we have for the incarnate ones, even the air we breathe, our bodies functioning in the way that they are, our heart beating, our brains continue to work, everything working so perfectly around us, inside us, everything that we have, this opportunity that we have for those around us to live in society. If we were to register every benefit that we have and daily that we receive, we would be astounded by our own ingratitude. And in the book, Our Daily Bread, this is message number 11, called The Good is Tireless. A man is going to say, the sincere disciple is well aware of the fact that Jesus has performed his ministry of love tirelessly ever since the beginning of the planet's formation. Regarding our own personal cases, the Master very often must have felt the thorn of our ingratitude at seeing our retreat before the work of our own illumination. Christ's patience has never become exhausted at observing our willful and criminal detours, and he lovingly corrects us and constructively tolerates our faults, opening his merciful arms to us for renewing endeavors. How many times must the Master have felt our ingratitude? How many times have we been ungrateful? And how much we should be grateful? But of course, being the evolved spirit that he is, the Master waits for us. Much like the patient sower, it waits for the seeds to grow, for the seeds to germinate and to generate fruits. But it depends on us, and it depends on us to practice as well the gratitude for everything that we have. But there's something that hurts us as well, which is the ingratitude from others. And for that, the gospel, according to Spiritism, is going to say, those who seek reward on earth for the good they have done will not then receive it in heaven. However, God will esteem all who do not seek their rewards here on earth. Of course, they talk about the true treasure not being here, not being of this planet, not being something material, not being something that accumulates rust, So this idea that not seeking these rewards, we shouldn't be seeking others to be grateful to us or for us. It's their own path, it's their own learning. But of course, when we do something for someone, we still feel a little sting sometimes of, that person didn't even say thank you. They didn't even acknowledge that I helped them, or that I was here for them. You should always help the weak, they're going to say, although knowing beforehand that you will receive no thanks for your help. But you can always be sure that if the person to whom you did a service forgets, God will take this even more into account than if the beneficiary had paid their debt. Meaning that we shouldn't expect gratitude from others, and we shouldn't seek gratitude from others. Hey, you're not gonna even say thank you. You're not gonna say anything. We shouldn't seek that, or even if we don't externalize, even if our thoughts, or we're breeding that sort of thought, that bitter thought of like, oh, they didn't even say thank you, or show their gratitude. Because if we do that, if we are able to avoid doing that, if we're able to do these things to help the weak, to help everybody else, without expecting anything in return, especially, then, as it's saying here, God will recompense us, that there will be even more for us to reap, because that's the true nature of charity, is not doing something and expecting something in return. And also in this book here, called, Vineyard of Light, you know, also for a reminder, we don't have this one in English. There's this message here that says, wherever there is the possibility of being useful, let us move forward with a strong spirit, building good, even if faced with irony, coldness, or ingratitude, because according to the enlightened word of the apostle of the Gentiles, God did not give us the spirit of fear, but of power, of love, and moderation. Course, like I said, ingratitude then being the opposite from what we must overcome, being actually sources of selfishness and pride, having their roots in selfishness and pride. And, you know, all of this theoretically is beautiful, but there are a few things that I wanted to offer you guys today for us to practice our gratitude and to have sort of these, and I put in quotations here, these tools. If you imagine a toolbox, you know, and we have all these different tools and different ways that we can use to incorporate gratitude in our lives. So, and I brought a few of them here. A gratitude journal, something that I recommend to do. So every night, writing about, could be on your phone, writing about something that you're grateful for during that day. Grateful contemplation. So this is, 5 to 10 minutes every day without distraction, stopping and mentally contemplating something that you're grateful for during that day. So actually stopping and try to realize something that you're grateful for during the day. The other one is more external, perhaps, is to give thanks. So make an effort during the day to give thanks to someone that helped you in some way. A gratitude letter, which is writing a letter to someone that you appreciate, that did something good for you, that maybe you didn't say thank you enough, or you didn't show your gratitude, but you can do that through the letter. And here's the interesting piece. You can decide to send the letter or to keep the letter, but just writing that letter, thinking of gratitude, the thought being directed to that person already gonna have a big effect. The other one is having gratitude or a conversation surrounding gratitude. And this is with someone else. You take turns and each person can name three things. It's just a suggestion, right? The person names three things that they are grateful for during the day, but then discuss each point, or during the week. It could be three things during the week that they were grateful for, but like really explore those 3 points and not just say, oh, food, this and that. Just explore those points. Or a mindfulness walk as well, a way to be grateful for nature, to be grateful for God, just walking around and appreciating nature, appreciating the things that we have, that we often take for granted, the trees, everything that we have around us, that we often take for granted, and focusing on the senses as well, what you can see, what you can hear, etc., what you can smell. Last but not least, I brought one that I do it myself. I recommend to patients, I recommend to friends, I recommend in these types of lectures. It's called a gratitude jar. So a gratitude jar. So in this one, it's what you're gonna do. We can have this one at home. You're gonna write on a post-it note every day something you're grateful for. So you can have it on your nightstand, on the kitchen. Grab a post-it note, write something you're grateful for. Could be just a word. Could be, let's say, my cat. I'll write cat, my cat. And you put it in a gratitude jar. On the last day of the month, so you can do this with your partner, we can do it with children or whoever you live with, you can grab that jar at the end of the month, unscrew it, open the jar, and read out loud together all of those post-its, all of those things that happen during that month that you are grateful for. So again, we're in the beginning of the year 2025. I know everybody probably has resolutions and everything. I guess one of them could be for us to be more grateful, and this is a great exercise for us to practice our gratitude, because what happens is there's a double dipping here, there's a double effect, because as we're writing every day something you're grateful for in that post-it note, which is something that takes maybe 3 seconds, 5 seconds, we are practicing gratitude. But then when at the end of the month we open that jar and we start to read those post-it notes, what we see is we are almost reliving those things that we're grateful for. That moment we were grateful for those things, we are remembering them. So it's like we're being grateful again for them. And that will definitely generate a positive feeling. And as I've shown you from multiple slides, all of those studies and everything that that show how gratitude can have a great impact on mental health, spiritual health, psychological health, and all those things. So you can do that again with partners. The way we do it is we each have a color. So I know that my color for my post-its, my wife's, etc. And it's great. I mean, I gave this lecture 2 years ago, and somebody came to me and said that they're still doing it after having the lecture. They said their younger son is doing as well. So it's something I definitely recommend. Again, we're starting a new year. Maybe let's start with some good habits. And with that, I just want to say, to express my gratitude to BSH to invite me, to give me this opportunity to talk about something that I'm passionate about, something that I hope can help those who have listened to this, and I have contributed in some way, and to help us be more grateful and express our gratitude and practice our gratitude so it becomes a habit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yuri. Wonderful. Another concise, clear presentation. Thank you so much. It's always good to hear your presentations. We really appreciate you coming back, and we hope you'll come even once again. But it was really nice to hone in, and I think that the thing I want to take away with me today is that idea that gratitude is a form of charity, because you described it as an act of love. And also when we think about, when we read the Spirit's book, and pride and selfishness is the obstacles, that prevent our moral progress, we can also see gratitude as the solution in that, because you said, when we have humility, we become aware that we're not separate from everybody. And this is where pride, we think we're separate, we're different, we're in competition, and then also the idea of that ingratitude is really just a direct, selfishness. When when we read in the I believe it's in the Spirit's book, when they talk about suicides, how, you know, very much, that root cause is discontentment and a level of selfishness, because it's almost, getting that tunnel vision. Anyway, I wanted to thank you so much, and we'll open it up for comments, questions from the group. Please be sure to unmute yourself.
Thank you, Yuri, for your nice presentation. That was very useful for me. And that is be thankful. I'm sorry that my English is not good to explain everything clear. That what I want to say is that thankful is mostly for ourselves. We enjoy that when we thank somebody, and we learn from that, and we shouldn't wait that the people say thank you or not. Even in a kindergarten, we teach the children, or in the family, when you want to get something, say please, and these two words, they say thank you, you get it. That is the magic words that they should learn. But it is a that's why I wanted to say, we, as a Jesus said, that you, when somebody was healed and thanked him, that you don't need to thank, your faith saved you or healed you. That means that we shouldn't wait that somebody says thank you. It should be unconditional. It is work what we do to the others. That is very important, that we don't wait for thanks. Even the thanks is for us. We enjoy that when we say that. And the other thing is be thankful is a good word to say, but that is better to use, understand that from the eyes, from the mimic of the people. Some people, they are ashamed to thank, to say any word. But when you look at the face, you see they are thankful for that what they get. And the other things is we shouldn't be thankful for what we have. Do we learn that we thank for what we don't have? When that is a thankful is to observe something. We praise every time, any minutes, but we don't watch it. We don't observe that we should be thankful for that. When we cannot rest for a short time, we are dead, and we are not thankful for that. Or when we have no pain, we are not thankful for that. Thank you that we don't have pain. We only thank when we have pain and it's healed, you know. And many things like this that we don't have, we are not thankful for that. When I am not addicted to some drug, I should be thankful for that. I don't see that. That is, usually I cannot see my weight, that I have weight. But when I observe that, I can see that. And thankful is mostly to observe something that we have, that to recognize that we have that, and don't look at what we don't have in a asset. Thank you very much again. Thank you.
Hi, Yuri. I always look at a person who doesn't say thank you and think to myself, this is a good opportunity for me to see how I feel about that. Do I want it to come from them or do I want it to come from God? And of course, I always want it to come from God, But, young people need to be taught, to be grateful or to say thank you, as a practice. That's the only thing I see about being thoughtful to remind someone else of it. It's young people. They need that practice. But for me, I often think about it like I'd rather it come from God, but I also wonder what would God give me? How does that come? But there's so many different ways that it could come. I wouldn't know if the blessing is here on a physical level, or is it all going to be on a spiritual level and in another life? It's infinite. You just don't know. But I do feel blessed every day to practice prayers and gratitude for those who are in my life, people like you who come and speak, for all of the interactions, for the friends, for those who help with the homeless, whether it's money or if they come physically and help. I mean, I'm grateful. I'm truly grateful because every time somebody helps, trust in God is at the right time. It's at the right time. The last person that helped, oh my God, I could have kissed them. I mean, I was so grateful because I needed it. I needed to get the bread and the meat, for the sandwiches. It was just awesome. And I'm still grateful. And it wasn't even for me, it's for them, you know. So, but anyway, God is amazing, amazing. And in so many ways, when I slow my mind down and think about, the things that have happened, even over the years, and things that have happened, like the hardships and stuff, not that they stopped, but it just seemed like it was harder when I had kids and I was more distracted, in survival mode and all that. But I'm still grateful for the lessons. I really am. Anyway, that's my story and I'm sticking to it.
Yuri, thank you so much. As Teresa said, very easy to digest the principles of each slide. So congratulations on a good presentation. And your resource approach of quoting the various spiritist literature, also excellent. Easy for us to grasp. There's a word that goes hand in hand for me with gratitude, and that word is appreciation. And recognize that I've gone through an evolution of improvement is not only to be grateful for it, but also to appreciate those who have assisted me in this process. And so, I look at this Zoom call and I realize there's a vast majority of folks here that I truly appreciate and I'm grateful for under this umbrella called Spiritism. It's just an amazing thing. And for me to have encountered this transformation so late in life is truly special. Another reason for appreciation and gratitude. Thank you.
Well, I too would like to say thank you. And I don't know how clear I'll be on this, but I'll try. When I look at you, Yuri, you manifest, in my view, exactly what you're talking about. You look calm, you look serene. It looks like you benefited from all the gratitude that you, in fact, talked to us about. Like Mark, I also connect appreciation to this. The most important thing, I think, is this topic can seem simple, and being grateful seems like a simple thing to tell a person. But the one thing for sure we all need are reminders. And we need several of these reminders. So again, when Mark talked about appreciation, I'm in a house now that I really am appreciative to have. But I couldn't get this house until I appreciated the old house that I had. It was weird, but I'm still conscious of that. So even when and this is over 30 years ago, but when you were talking about being grateful, that came to me. I said, oh, but I do need reminders, and I know that others need reminders. And there were points of time in my life when I should have been able to say thank you to different things that people may have done for me, but I didn't realize I could or should. I don't know. So I think that the lesson, what you offer is so important for us to remember that you can't just have one lesson. You can't be told just one time, but you have to be told this over and over and be receptive at different times. And if there are going to be people like Gina talked about who won't say thank you, but that may be something that triggers for them later. They'll realize, oh, I have a son, for example, who often, he doesn't say a lot of things, but he'll give this gesture. So in his mind, he's spoken. But for us, he hasn't said a thing, So anyway, we all go through a process. All I have to say, I'm very appreciative of your presentation. Thank you so much.
Okay, well, thank you to everyone who has joined us, and a big thank you to Yuri, for coming back and sharing this beautiful topic of gratitude with us. And so now we'll move on to the second part of our service today, which is the virtual passes, the healing section. So we will take about let's take about I don't know, it's 9 after the hour. So maybe a 4-minute break. No, maybe that's too long. A 3-minute break. We'll take a 3-minute break and come back and do the second part. And I just remind everyone to bring your water, bring names or pictures of loved ones that you'd like to send good intentions to. And we'll be back in about 12 minutes after the hour. Thank you.